And welcome back to another episode of Being Bookish. I am joined today by Niloufar Lamakan. Again, please correct me if I get your name wrong, because I don't want to, about her brand new book, Age to Perfection. Now, many of you will know that I am in my 50s, having reached that wonderful point of half a century last year. And it's very difficult to find characters or find any main protagonists that are my age or older, especially in romance. And this book, Age to Perfection, is about a woman who has hit her 61st year. So thank you very much, first of all, for joining me today to talk about this.
Hello there. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to having this chat with you.
I love talking books, and I think one of my first loves was this genre, starting with books by Jenny Colgan, Jill Mansell. Looking at my bookcase, lots of them. And this obviously they write about younger characters, so characters who are in their 20s, 30s, sometimes early 40s. And your main character, Sophia, is in her 60s. Is this a new trend?
Well, I hope so. I hope I've started a trend. Yes. I mean, that was one of the things that was really important to me when I started writing the book, was to have a really age positive book. Because as you mentioned, you don't get many rom-coms where the main protagonist is in their any older than 40 generally.
I mean,
And
you're getting more films that are like that now. Book
true.
Club, 80 for Brady, and most of the films with Diane Keaton, Jane Fonda. And obviously, there was that Grace and Frankie that Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin did. And they are very, very sex positive women in their 60s, 70s, 80s. But it hadn't really translated to the page until now.
No, that's very true. There's still quite a small proportion, though, aren't they,
Oh,
compared to
absolutely.
how many younger women you get in films. And I found the other thing was that if you did get women over 50 or over 60, they were always in a supporting role. They were never the main attraction.
Or they're mismarpled.
Exactly, yeah. Portrayed as little old ladies. So I just wanted to have a character that's a bit kick-ass and, knows what she wants and doesn't care about what other people think. So up to a point. So yeah, that was really important to me.
Which is really good. So tell people who haven't come across this book yet what it's about, obviously with no spoilers, because the ending is somewhat unexpected. But if you could tell people what the book's about, give a little blurb on Age to Perfection and, of course, our main protagonist.
Yes. So the protagonist is called Sophia Stone. As you mentioned, she's in her 61st year. She had recently had her heart broken, and she'd run away abroad to get over it. And when the book starts, she's been back for a little while. And it's New Year's Eve at the beginning of the book. And her best friend is trying to match her up with men, basically, at the New Year's Eve party, with drastic results. So her friend then tries to persuade her to accept a challenge to go out with a different man every week. And at first, Sophia's very reluctant to accept this and just says, look, it sounds like too much hard work. I'm happy as I am. I'm not really interested. But then she reflects on it, and the next day she thinks, well, maybe there could be something in this. Maybe I could go on a date with a new man every week, but I can just do it without emotional entanglement and just have fun and have sex. So that's what she decides to do. And that's the premise of the book, and we follow her over a year of her life of dating.
That, I think that's the thing. You have the lack of, or the decision to remove romantic entanglement from her statement, her pronouncement, her New Year's resolution really is reflected greatly in the way that the naming convention that you use for her dates, especially the ones that continue on for a little bit of time. You have the hot one, the orgasm one, you have the opera buff. They're all identified by an interest that she found on their dating profiles more than anything else. Was that
That's
an
right.
intention?
I was thinking, okay, so she's going to have 52 dates. That's a lot of names to think of.
That's also a lot of chapters.
Yes. So I started, when I first started the book, I started to give them names. And then there was one point I thought, well, actually, they've all got their own characteristic that they're identifiable by. So why not make that a thing and just give them the names? It makes them more anonymous. But also it sort of distills who they are in a short phrase as well. Like Cement Man, for example,
Yes.
which is based on a true life experience of meeting someone who was obsessed with bricks. So I just thought I'll swap that a little bit.
Were they real bricks or Lego?
Real bricks, yes, real bricks.
I don't know if that's worse than having a massive interest in Lego.
Well, you can imagine how that went.
Yes, I imagine that was an enthralling evening. I mean, that's the thing with they are distilled down to those individual characteristics, almost to not dehumanize them, but to identify that there is nothing more, even though for a while it does seem as though Sophia is getting kind of entangled with the hot one.
That's right, yes. I think once I got going on that idea, I decided that was how it was going to be. And only the person, that she might end up with may have a name, or but you have to find that out when you get to read the book.
Exactly. She does have a very strong support system, but also provides a lot of support for them in return. So there are moments where you think it's not quite a balanced relationship, but then you see certain things occurring with Layla and obviously with Grace. That was quite a tough bit to read. And then her friend AJ, who's also going through marital strife. And then you see her familial relationships. Sarah was horrible to her. I know that she had her reasons, and you do find those out as the story goes on, but she is downright nasty. Oh, well, I don't like holiday photos. Well, they're your sisters. Still not interested. There's this massive dismissal as though she's pushing her away because she's resentful of her, when you discover the truth, there is far more reason for Sophia to be resentful of her sister.
That's right. I mean, just to say that she is completely fictional. She has nothing
Yes,
to do with my lovely sister, who
That's
would
good.
never say anything like that. But don't you find, though, I found this in my life, is when something is wrong and you're not happy, you do tend to show the worst of it to people you love, because you sort of feel, in a way, you know that they know that you love them and they love you, and it sort of comes out as nastiness sometimes, but it's not meant to be. I don't know why. Is that not your experience? Not being nasty, but just feeling like that's where you show it, whereas you're more guarded with other people, maybe.
I tend to be incredibly buried when it comes to anybody in my life. If I'm being completely honest, I will confide certain things, but then there are other things that I just push right down until they explode. And they tend to explode with me burying my face in a pillow and screaming. It's easier. I think it's easier for me to not explain my feelings in that respect. But yeah, I get where you're coming from with that. I think obviously it came across she was very judgmental, incredibly judgmental, not only of her sister, but also of certain things that their mother did.
Yes. I mean, during the book, she sort of sides with the mum a bit more than she does with Sophia. But yes, she's definitely not age positive. Let's put it that way. And
Oh,
she's
absolutely.
mental.
Absolutely. How much younger is she? Because that's one thing that never comes across, especially if she's got younger children.
I think I mentioned somewhere that she's 50, so she's 10 years younger.
So she had her children
Yeah.
quite late then.
Yes, yes. So they're teenagers. They're 13, 14. So yeah. She's yeah, she's nasty.
I mean, she's going to reach the point that Sophia is, but she's in a slightly different situation because obviously we get a lot of Sophia's backstory with her first husband James and all the struggles they went through and the reason they separated. And then obviously we find out about some of her other relationships that didn't quite work. And she's very, despite the fact that she must be absolutely devastated with certain things, she's never sits there and says, well, it's everybody else's fault.
No, I think some of that comes from me. We all put a little bit of ourselves in the book, especially as the first one. And I'm a very positive person, so I always try and make the best of the situation that I have, and try and be happy with that. Basically, I don't see any point in sitting around complaining about things because the only person it hurts is you. So I think some of that came out in Sophia in terms of being positive and not allowing things to get to her too much. Although obviously she had her moments where she's devastated.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's how you deal with situations like that and how you move on that's important.
Yeah, and obviously she has there's a lot going on not only with her but with her family. There's the separation almost between her parents when her mother finds a new lease of life in something different and her father is not exactly the most supportive person about it. And then you have her friend Ace and his separation, and that was the reason behind that was a shock, but we won't go into that because that's a spoiler. And I mean, that really did come as a shock. I'm sitting there thinking, oh, it's going to be this person, it's going to be that pardon.
Well, it happens, doesn't it?
Yes, and then obviously we have her friend Layla and Layla's younger husband Jude. Oh,
Yes, Jude's a proper villain. I enjoyed writing him. He really doesn't have many redeeming features.
does he have any redeeming features?
No, I don't think so. I think he was quite nice to Layla,
Yes, but he was quite nice to Layla because he was a gold digger.
Well, yeah, who knows, yeah, but Sophia never trusted him. She knew there was something slithery about him, and he showed his true colours quite quickly.
But that's the thing, isn't
but
it?
then that happens in life, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
everybody has one of those friends who their friend has been with someone that they didn't trust, that they as the friend didn't trust or didn't like, and they thought something was a bit dodgy about them. But they know if they say something when they're friends with them. I've been in this situation. I had a friend who was with somebody that was absolutely awful. They split up and they were saying, oh, I made the best mistake. You think I made the right choice, don't you? So you say, yes, of course you do. And I said, of course you made the right decision for you. It was the right choice. He was not the person for you. And then they got back together and it was my fault.
Yes, exactly. I was actually in that situation one time with someone I worked with who was having an affair with a married man, and the wife, oh no, she found out that he'd been cheating on her as well with somebody else. So he had 3 women on the go, and I found out about this and thought, should I tell her? This is terrible. She should know. And I did tell her in the end, and her reaction was, "I'm going to fight for my man." And I thought, I needn't have bothered. He's not your man anyway.
That's the thing. I mean, ultimately, that is the right, taking a step back and not doing anything is probably the right choice, because you're always the villain, because you've broken the bad news and they don't like it. Or
Yes, I
you've
mean, like,
supported their decision to end it with someone, and then they get back with them and you don't like him. You told me you don't like him, so I'm not going to spend any time with you anymore. And it's like, and that's the situation I think that Sophia finds herself in with Layla and Jude, because she
yeah,
knows he's a wrong 'un.
absolutely. And I think I'm very cautious actually when people break up, is to not try,
Yes,
not take sides and try and be neutral about the situation, because there's always a chance they'll get back together. But it is though, if you've got a really close friend and you feel they're being made a fool of, you want to do something about it, because you feel like a really bad friend not to tell them. But it's a massive dilemma, because people do want to close their eyes to things, because often people know. Often they know, they have an inkling something isn't right, but they don't want to admit it to themselves. Um, like, if you take a woman home to your marital bed and she's covered in perfume, your wife's going to know,
because I don't wear that perfume.
but your wife might decide to ignore it because they don't want to rock the boat.
Or it
So
could be the man, you take a man home and smells of aftershave, and your husband's, I mean, they're not always the most observant. That's not a generalized comment. They aren't always the most observant. So some women aren't either, but you are going to potentially notice that something isn't quite right, or you hope somebody's going to notice, so you aren't the one that has to break the news.
yes,
And I
exactly.
think that was kind of what it seemed like Sophia was hoping would happen. But Jude always knew the right things to say until he
And
didn't.
and he was very devious, which a lot more devious than Sophia. So she hadn't quite anticipated how he might respond, and how he would behave to protect himself. Um, so that's when it got interesting.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. So what inspired you with these particular characters? Were there people that you knew, or did you sit down and envisage these characters, and as you were writing them they became more human?
Well, I have to say, when I started writing, I had no idea what I was doing. I was dabbling. I tend to like to do lots of new things, and I did a short creative writing course at City Lit, the wonderful institution in London, and I started doing weekly classes. And our teacher kept saying, "Well, what projects have you got on? When are you going to write a novel?" And then I thought, well, maybe I should have a go. So I started writing, but honestly, now I look back, I was writing absolute drivel, because I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't planned it. But over time, I tried over and over again. I had my work looked at and got feedback on it. Spent many, many, many evenings watching webinars about writing, listening to authors, and doing any free online course that you could do on writing. I did them. So, and then just gradually learn, and the quality of my writing got a little bit better. And yeah, that's so. I can't say I plan the characters, but I think they're all, like a lot of the events and a lot of the dates. They're mashups of people maybe I've come across, or experiences I've had in the past, and I've sort of mashed them up and reconstituted them into a new person or a new experience. I
I
think
think
also when I first started, it was definitely me I was writing about, as a lot of debut writers do. But as I got through it, I thought, well, no, actually, I don't want this to be about me. I'll draw on some of my experiences, but she needs to be her own person. So I think as I went on, that became the case, and she took a life of her own. Yeah.
which is good. I mean, she's a strong, independent character. She doesn't need anybody to validate who she is. And that definitely comes across on the page. I felt that Layla, to a degree, was strong, but she also relied greatly on the people that she had around her. Whereas you can kind of imagine Sophia being, I'm going on a trek around. You could have imagined her doing wild.
Yes. So she's definitely more independent and able to function on her own. Whereas Layla, although she's a very strong character, with a lot of positives and great friendship between them, she's one of those women who needs to have a man by her side all the time. So that's quite a big driver for her to have a partner in life.
Yeah. She doesn't like being single.
Yes.
Everybody knows somebody like that.
Yes, exactly. So, doesn't take long before moving from one to the other. But, a lot of men are like that. In fact, most men are like that. Men tend to move on from one to the other quite quickly.
Well, we were talking earlier about how they've done scientific studies, and single women live longer than single men, and married men live longer than married women.
Yes, that's very true. I've seen that written about as well. And I think that's why you often find, like, if you've got friends who've separated or got divorced, the man in the relationship tends to move on a lot more quickly than the woman does. You'll find, a year later, he's shacked up with someone else, and she's still like getting over it and working out how her life's going to go forward.
Sort of like the Four Seasons.
What do you mean?
The Four Seasons, it was originally a film, I think 1981.
Right.
And they recently remade it into a TV series with Tina Fey, I believe. And one of the main characters, played by Steve Carell, and his wife of 25 years separate and divorce. He moves on really, really quickly. And she's left trying to figure out what to do with her life. She's not quite sure because she's been with him for all that time. But he moves on incredibly quickly to a younger woman.
Well, that's the thing, is more often than not, men have that option, and it's much more acceptable, still much more acceptable for an older man and younger woman rather than the other way around. Although it's happening more now, but
Yes. But then when you've got women who are in their 60s looking like Halle Berry and Sandra Bullock.
Well, this is the thing, because I was talking about this with someone else the other day, where, you've got people like Nicole Kidman and Halle Berry and all of those getting nominated for Oscars and having leading roles. But you just think they still have to look like that.
Yeah.
So even if older women are being portrayed, they just look absolutely amazing, and they don't really look their age, and they always, they look younger. So you think, what about the majority of the population?
But that's the thing. I mean, I think that with Hollywood, that's the case. But look at Judi Dench, Maggie Smith, Helen Mirren, Celia Imrie, and Samantha Bond, and so on. They are accepted. They are aging gracefully, or did age gracefully in the case of Maggie Smith. Obviously, they aged gracefully, and they looked their age, or they looked a close proximity of their age. But I do think that we are aging slightly slower. You look at TV shows in the 70s and 80s, and then you discover that John Thor, for example, was in his 40s when he was playing in the Sweeney, and he still looked like he was in his 60s.
Yes, I don't know why that is. Whether we're looking after ourselves more, or I think attitudes are changing. Certainly, I think if maybe a few decades ago, if you got to 60, you would think yourself, "Oh, I'm really old now," whereas you don't. think about
But
now.
then
A
we
lot
were
of people,
retiring in our 50s.
well, exactly.
I envy my grandmother who retired at 52, when I think I'm going to be working until I'm 68 if I'm lucky.
Yes, exactly. And you just think that's being lengthened. But we live different lives as well, I think. There are more options around the things you can do, and hobbies you can take up, and ways of meeting people that keeps you young, keeps you active. Maybe that's why. I don't know the reason.
And that, I think that's the interesting thing. I always look at it and think, in women in their 50s, for example, were in the end throes of their lives, especially career wise. They were obviously no longer fertile, so their usefulness to society seemed to have gone, which is such an awful stereotype, but it is how it was felt at that point. A woman who hadn't had children, a woman who could no longer have children, was not of the same value as she was when she was younger. And we finished work a lot younger. Whereas now, my mum's 71 this year, she still works full time. I'm in my
Yeah.
50s. Obviously, I still work full time. I can't claim my pension for ages, uh, unfortunately.
I
And
claimed mine, but I'm still working.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's it. It's one of those things where I think our life values have changed. And with that evolution has come a need to feel and look younger. So, I mean, my grandmother used Pond's cold cream. I've been using anti-aging cream since I was in my 20s.
Well, we're both moisturizing addicts, aren't we?
Yes,
I
I have
found
to
that
admit.
about you.
Yeah, I am. I have to admit, I use a lot of moisturizer. Put it on at least twice a day. Use moisturizing face masks twice a week. Uh,
Oh, really? Oh, God, yeah, you do more than me. I only do it once a day, but my hands get moisturized several times a day, definitely.
See that? I think that's the thing. That is more how you can tell. Look, a perfect example is looking at Madonna. Her
Mm,
face is very, very taut. She's had surgery, obviously, but she also uses a lot of filters. You can tell her age from her hands.
yes. Well, that's why she wears gloves. But, I don't want to be judgmental about people
But people
having
do, the thing is, I
surgery or
think people
whatever.
do what makes them feel comfortable, but also what is required of the industry that they happen to be in.
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? I think if it makes you feel better and you feel better about yourself, do it. I don't always think it's an improvement on people, but it's how they feel that matters. But the sad thing is that a lot of the time people feel obliged to do it because they think that's the only way they can remain relevant. And that's what we need to fight, not
Oh,
whether
absolutely.
women have surgery or not, but
This
let's
need that they
get rid
feel,
of that need. Yeah. And I think
because
that can only happen by appreciating older women for what they offer and valuing them, rather than saying, you're too old, therefore do whatever you can to try and make yourself you look younger to be relevant. Whereas we have a lot more to offer than
yeah,
that.
I used to work in an industry where we actually looked after the older population and housing. And we had a review or an email once from somebody who said, oh, well, the over 60s don't need housing, just put them in a nursing home. Which shows the lack of understanding about the aging process. But also, yes, there will be some people who reach their 60s and require that kind of care because they've experienced something unfortunate in their lives. But for the vast majority, they are still fully contributing members of society who have full-time jobs, whether that's in an office environment, in a shop, wherever. They are still doing a full-time job for at least another 5 or 6 years, if not longer.
Mm.
And it just absolutely, it blew my mind that anybody could have that kind of belief that when you get to your 60s, your life is over. I mean, Sophia's experiences prove that that is not the case. She is a vibrant woman who finds almost a second, well, I'd say a third wind, probably, when it comes to her dating choices, because they are not all men of her age. In fact, the vast majority of them aren't men of her age.
Yes, I think maybe if your attitude is different in terms of how you feel about your age, that comes across, and then you know, a younger man might be attracted to you because you give off a different vibe. You know, you don't give off a vibe that says, well, you know, I'm past it now, I'm getting on a bit, you know. So why not, you know?
I think the only time I feel past it is when I've done a full week at work and I've still got, I haven't really done a full week at work. I've done 3 days at work and I feel like I've done a month.
I get those days, yes.
And it gets to Thursday morning, I wake up and I think, it's not Saturday yet.
Well, I've still got my day job as well, so I'm an interior designer in my other life. So I'm still working on client projects, which I still enjoy, and it's fulfilling. It's a rewarding job because you make.
So did you ever have a client who wanted a heated marble central unit in their kitchen?
No, but I know of one who did.
I figured that must have come from some conversation at some point, because that's very unique.
Specific, isn't it? Yes.
Very specific.
Well, you know, they say write about what you know, and I thought, well, I'll make her an interior designer because I've got lots of stories and mishaps or whatever to talk about. I've been very careful not to talk about anyone in particular. Again, it's a mashup of experiences, because I started writing the book and I was writing about things to do with interior design, and I was thinking, no, come on, you know, the person would know what I was writing about if I wrote that. So I'm hoping that none of this is identifiable. Well, it shouldn't be, because none of it directly applies to one person.
I mean, some of the requirements, like the designed toilet.
I did do a project where I went in and that's all they wanted.
The smallest room in the thing is, the smallest room in the house.
Yeah.
It does have to be nice.
Yes, absolutely. And it was beautiful when I'd finished, and I ended up doing the rest of the house as well. And I ended up getting other jobs on the back of it, because other people had seen it and really liked it. So never say no to the small room project.
I think that's it. It's the smallest room in the house. I think those rooms are some among the most important, because you don't have any choice about spending time in them.
Yes, and
I love my bathroom to be shades of blue with theme of water, rather than when I was exceedingly tired, I started hallucinating that this strange pattern on my tiles was coming to life, because I was so tired, because my upstairs neighbors at the time had this propensity for wearing high heels on wooden flooring and walking around at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was trying to sleep.
Yes, not a very good neighbor.
No, but the hallucinations really did a number on me.
That must have been weird.
I thought it was a deer with antlers coming to life out of the tiles as I was having a shower in the morning. It was disturbing.
Well, I'd like to see those tiles, I have to say.
But I think that's it, though. That's why the design element is so important, and all of these little snippets that you put in of her day to day make you realize that she does have something outside of her relationships with her friends and her family that is uniquely her identity, but she doesn't make it all of her identity, unlike Cement Man.
Yes. Yes, I did want her as you said earlier, I wanted her to have a community and have strong relationships around her. And, you know, to be supportive of what was happening to her friends. But also that she, like you say, she had her own identity and she was good at her job and she was very successful. And yeah, and doing the smallest room in the house is often the most fun room to do.
Where can I put additional storage?
Followed closely by children's rooms, which I love doing because you can go a little bit mad with them as well.
I had my one of the one thing I wanted about my studio. I have the two walls, the two smallest walls are painted a blue color, but every single wall in this room has got glitter in it. So
Wow.
when I turn a light on in the evenings, it's like going into Snow White's cave, the seven dwarfs
That
cave in
sounds
Snow White.
amazing.
I love it. Absolutely love it. It gives it a bit more dimension.
Well, when you fancy doing a little bit more to that room, you should put in some fiber optic lights in the ceiling so it looks like it's a starry night.
I would love to, but I rent.
Okay.
I rent. I mean, I would go all out with this room. I would have moved plugs, sockets, and everything to put in more bookcases quite happily. I have dreams about how I always wanted a library, so I had dreams about how I do it, but this is probably the limitations. I can't put any more bookcases in because I have no more
Well,
room.
it looks fabulous behind you, I have to say.
That's more
Very
to do.
nicely done.
So with these, I mean, obviously, I think most women of a certain age are familiar with certain things that Sophia goes through, including the white hair on the chin.
Well,
Those
we've
things
all
more
got
than
them, haven't
anything,
we?
those things more than anything humanized her for me, because I have several, and they're the hard, horrible, stumpy little growths that you can barely find with a pair of tweezers.
And you know, the tragedy of it is that you can have laser treatment now for hair that you don't want, like those.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work on white hairs, on grey hairs, which is very
Because
sad.
I'm
I
guessing
need
because
them
of the
to
lack of
invent one
pigment.
that does those as well.
I wonder if that's to do with the lack of pigment.
It is, yeah, because the laser looks for a pigment. So if you've got dark hair, the best way it works is if you have dark hair on very pale skin. That's when you get the best results.
Yes, unfortunately, mine is downy white. Because I'm incredibly pale. I mean, there are a few, but most of them are that horrible white. Some of them are so solid they feel like needles, and they are a nightmare. And when I read that bit where she was talking about plucking the white hair off her chin, all I could think was, oh yes, I've been there.
And you've been there when you've kissed someone who hasn't plucked theirs, and you feel
No, I
this
haven't.
needle stick in you, and you think, "I know, mine does that as well."
Hope they didn't notice. Did theirs
I
negate
always
mine?
like offer a bit of hair when I kiss.
See, that's the thing. Those little things are what really made her so human. And then going with her mum when she went to the photo studio, and the bond that she has with her parents. I mean, her parents can't exactly be young, given she's in her early 60s, but they are both very, very the same as Sophia in that they're very, very vibrant people who are just reaching that point where they're finding different interests.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I wanted to carry the age positivity through to the elder,
Yeah.
the generation before her as well. So yeah, I wanted like with the mother. I mean, she's very partly based on my mum because my mum is so active and so well liked, and you know, she's in her 90s now, but she's still out there going to friends' houses for dinner and gardening and everything. So, you know, some people, well, she's very lucky that she's healthy. And we're very lucky that she's healthy at this age.
Yes.
So I wanted to reflect a little bit of that. Not the horrible bits, but just to show that you can have an energy and a buzz about you when you're older.
I think that's it though, isn't it? We have this, I can remember being 8 years old and opening the door, actually 9 years old, and opening the door to our milkman and saying, my mum's really old today, she's 28. I think that the younger you are, the more you look at the older generations and think, oh my gosh, that's ancient. I can remember thinking to myself, in the year 2000, I'm going to be 26.
Right.
And thinking, oh, wow, that's old.
Really
And now
ancient.
I look back at that and think, yeah, well, 25 years have gone.
I know. I think that's the next struggle, isn't it? Is to try and get the younger generation to understand. You know, maybe older people are now understanding that we're not past it when we get to a certain age and allow themselves to carry on. But we need to make the younger generation understand.
But it's also about, I think there is a lot when it comes to age separation. You'll find, oh, Gen Z, they do this, millennials do this. Every single generation has that momentary judgment of the generation that comes after it. I can remember being, obviously I'm Gen X, looking at millennials and going, oh, really?
Yeah.
And now we're on Gen Alpha, and I think we're at the end of Gen Alpha.
Yes, it'd be Gen Z's turn, because millennials are being made fun of by Gen Z at the moment.
Yes.
And being labelled as uncool. But
I dread to, that's the thing. I mean, what's really lucky from my perspective is that Gen X has kind of been forgotten in everything, because people go, oh, there's baby boomers and then there's millennials, and I'm thinking, hang on a second, there's a generation in between. Where are we?
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, you don't hear much about Gen X. Yeah.
But I think that's because we are quiet. We're the ones that sit back, and we did have to make the transition between technology and no technology, because we didn't get mobile phones until we were, most of us, in our 20s, and computers and things like that. I think we had 2 computers at school, and that was it. The internet has become a thing while we've had to adapt, but we've kind of kept quiet about it, whereas other generations, not so much.
Yes. And it's also, I think, how people react to things that happen in society and cultural shifts and so on. So maybe people are, younger people now are more vocal about things like that.
Yeah, because a lot of things happened in the 80s, and the middle Gen Xers, of which I am one, rather than the early Gen Xers, who obviously were the early to mid 60s, are the ones who were adults when the 80s came around, and there was a massive shift in the 80s. Whereas the mid to later Gen Xers weren't really part of any of that change, or they were, but they weren't really hugely involved in it because they were too young.
Yeah, so it already happened. Well, I'm a boomer, and we're just vilified for draining the country's resources.
I know. My mum's a boomer as well. I think it's very unfair to blame any particular generation for everything.
No, and also, you know, that's just how things were at that time.
Exactly.
And we took advantage of what was on offer. So just because things have changed, you can't now go back and blame the previous generation for it.
No,
really.
and I think this book is, obviously we have the younger generations because we have Jack and Charlotte, and we also have Grace and AJ's child, and then we have Jude, not necessarily a good example of his generation, but we'll leave it there. But we do have multiple generations in this book. It's not just a case of every single person is Layla and Sophia's age, or Sophia's parents' age, or Sarah's age, because obviously she's a Gen Xer. Not every single person is lumped into that exact same group. We have a variety of characters that we get to see their reactions to certain things. And obviously Lawrence is massively supportive. So Sarah's husband is massively supportive of Sophia's moving on more than anything.
Yes, yeah, I think it, again, the book is set in London, and I wanted to portray that by having people from different backgrounds and having more of a cosmopolitan feel to the groups that Sophia was in. And alongside that, I wanted to reflect that different age groups as well, because I think it's life, isn't it? That's how we live. So it's nice to portray that rather than just zone in on one certain group of people and only write about them. I mean, it just makes it more true to life.
Because I don't know about everyone, but I have, or I had, sadly one of my friends passed away, but I have friends in multiple age groups rather than just one, partly because of social media and the internet and podcasting. Strangely enough, I have friends who are younger than me, I have friends the same age as me, I have friends older than me, and a lot of it is books bring us together, but it's shared experiences more than anything. They're sharing their experiences of life with you, and I think that we're not losing that, but we are at risk of losing that because of that generational separation.
Yeah, I think I really wish that doesn't happen. I went to an Irish community event recently, and it was a ceilidh, and there was people playing music and singing and so on, and it was so lovely because there was right across the generations, from teenagers to older people, grandparents, and everyone was together, and everyone joined in and sang and played their musical instruments. I mean, they were brought together obviously by the music and dancing, and it was just lovely to see that. And I think when you go on the continent, you see that more because you get families going out as families a lot more than you get in this country.
You also get a lot more, I think, community events than we do now.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've got lots of different friends because of the different groups that I've joined. And you meet people you would never have met through your a limited circle of friends. But if you put yourself out there and go and try things, I love dancing, and I've met loads of people through that, and they're all from different backgrounds and different ages as well. And I love that. It's really nice to I've got little pockets of friends with we've all got something in common that we do
I
together.
made some friends through waiting at the same bus stop every day from going home from work.
Yeah, I had some friends who did that with their commute on their train. They had a little club that they would always sit together.
We actually started a book club, and I now occasionally meet one of them for coffee because she lives around the corner. It's amazing, but I do think that is something that we are at risk of losing, which is really sad.
It is. So that would be very sad, but maybe we'll go back to it. Maybe we're going, through a
cycle,
a period, through a cycle where we're losing it, and then I think people might start appreciating it again. Hopefully.
Yes, we can but hope. And I think that's one of the lessons that I took away from the book, was the fact that these people are finding their way, and it doesn't matter how old you are, you still have things to discover about yourself and about the people in your life, because you've still got those times. There is still the opportunity to change and make waves, which Sophia is definitely doing.
definitely, yes. And I think just going back to her parents, even with them in their 80s, I know they had challenges in what was happening to them.
Yes.
But I hope the love that was underneath all of that came through in their relationship.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it was almost as though it felt like her husband felt like he was going to be left behind. And that
Yes,
was what was causing the tension more than anything else.
yes, exactly, exactly. So, but that's true to life, isn't it? People don't always move at the same rate, even when you get, especially maybe when you get older, depending on your health, um, and your circle of friends. You might be doing different things that don't always blend together.
And you might have felt comfortable on the path you were already on.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. But I thought, I liked the fact that they were together. There was a bond there that they shared, and even though they were experiencing problems that were quite challenging at times.
Yes, but both their children sort of come up with a solution that works, sort of is a workaround. Oh, well, you can do this and this will match up with what mum's doing. Had you considered that? And I liked the fact that there was that element of problem solving, and it shows because Sophia is the person that she even says at the very beginning that she is the person that people go to for advice, even though, I mean, her company sounds like it is a therapist rather than an interior designer with the title. But at the same time, once you read into it, you do think that is something, oh, I'm not happy with that. And is it because you're not happy with that, or is it because you're not happy with what you're doing?
Yes, there's often an underlying reason for things. And I do find in my job as an interior designer, you meet clients first time, and the second time you meet them, you're right there in the middle of their lives. I always say, I go around the house, I look inside their cupboards to see how they store things, because I need to know how they live, and I ask them really personal questions about how they live in the house, how do they use the bathroom, who does what and who likes to do what. So you are thrown in right into the middle of their lives. And sometimes you see the dynamics and you can tell what's going on, and it's not always about the interior design.
But then that's the thing, isn't it? It's like anything. Sometimes what it feels like, it looks like it is on the exterior, it isn't at all. It is about something that's going on in their head, in their relationship, in their workspace, with their friends, with their children, with a diet that they're not happy that they're on.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of those things. They can all contribute, but also, like with anything where you have to get two people to agree on something, it's not easy. Sometimes you find you get a couple who've got completely different ideas about what they want. And I do have to try and work out a solution that brings them together. Because at the end of the day, I've done a good job if I've managed to come up with something that they both love.
Well, she does have a couple of clients like that, doesn't she?
Yes.
Where
yes.
one's got these magnificent ideas and the other one's, that's not a great one. Don't really like that.
Yeah, often there's one person who cares about it more than the other one. But it varies, I find people jump in every now and then with really strong ideas and will not back down. And then the rest of the time they'll go, oh, I don't really care, just speak to him.
Do whatever.
Yeah. So you learn after a while, because a lot of the job of being an interior designer is communication and just listening to people, listening to what they're telling you, because people often say, oh, I don't know what I want, and then they go on to tell you exactly what they want, and they don't realize it. I just need to be able to interpret it for them.
Yeah, we've had that. when
That's
people are looking for a house. Oh, I don't know what I want, but it would be nice if it had this, and if it had a south-facing garden, and if it had bifold doors going out onto the garden. I'd like the option for an extension. I need a downstairs toilet. Okay, are you sure you don't know what you want?
But often people know what they don't want, and you can do it by process of elimination as well.
Yes, it's the
That's
same.
usually good. So
with
if they
coping.
say I don't like that, that's good from my point of view, because I know what to exclude then.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that's the important thing. If you can, it's easier to identify something that they might like if you know what they don't.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the same with finding the right relationship.
Yes, often people find it easier to say what they don't want with relationships and with people, and maybe how they look, and yeah, you do it
What
by
their interests are.
yes, you do it by saying I don't want that, and then you come down to a narrow area where where you
And
might
then you
consider.
realize that there's one person that fits in that, but there's one thing on that list that they don't like.
Well, there's one person that fits, but they happen to be married.
Or they've got an awkward relationship with their ex, or you name it, there's a list about 10 miles long of reasons why. But that's the thing. I think this book was interesting because it was so different to the majority of fiction that's out there right now. You do find that there are older characters when we're looking at a character who's talking about, in my youth I did this, so they're historical perspective and they're looking back at their life. Or you have the older investigator, so Marlowe Murder Club, Thursday Murder Club, and Vera Wong, who is one of my favorites. And
I'm reading the new one at the moment.
What, the Vera Wong? I finished it last week. But she's also, I mean, she's in her early 60s and she is portrayed as being very Miss Marple-esque.
Yes, I mean, when I've read the first one, I was thinking, oh, why does she keep calling her little old lady? She's only 60. And then now with the new one, I feel like maybe Jessie Sutanto's got that feedback, and I'll find she's explaining that a little bit more in that she Vera Wong wants to be known as a little old lady because then she can have her way and she can have people's respect for being old.
And she's disarming them.
Yeah, the voice still refers to her as little old lady. I'm thinking, no.
That's the as I said, there are always going to be those books, but then you look at the romance genre as a whole, and it is about younger characters. So having an older character that people who grew up with romance can look at and say, well, actually, yes, that's me.
Yes.
Or that's how I could be, is actually inspiring.
Yes, I think I might mention that when my publisher was doing their research into, how to market the book, and they found that younger women in their 40s were quite positive about it. The reason being that they wanted something positive to look forward to when they get older. And this book gives them that, rather than dreading being in your 60s. It paints a positive picture, and that's why people liked it.
Yeah, so, because there is that, speaking as someone who's climbing up there, that is something I know. I look at 60 in my 60s and I think that is because I looked at 50 and thought, oh, 50. I looked at 51 and thought, I'm now definitely in my 50s.
I know. Well, I'm now thinking about 70s and thinking, oh.
And I think that's the terrifying thing, is because we aren't told what to expect.
I think, but the lucky thing is, I think mentally we adjust, because you think, when you're 30, you think, oh my God, 40 is going to be terrible. But then you get there and think, oh, well, actually, it's not too bad. So that's not so old. And
I don't know.
adjust mentally.
40 was probably my worst year. I ended up in hospital for the first time in my life.
Oh my
Got
gosh.
diagnosed with diabetes and pernicious anemia. It
Oh,
wasn't a good year.
yeah.
It wasn't the best year. So 40 was a bit kind of, I didn't really want it. Then 41 was when it hit. It didn't hit me until that second year. And the same with 50. It didn't hit me until I was 51. And I suddenly thought, do I need to adjust my way of thinking? Do I actually now finally need to mature? I don't want to.
No, no, you should, like the strap line on the book, being age appropriate is so overrated. I really want to have this conversation with people when I talk about the book, is to just say, don't talk to me about age appropriate. I don't like that phrase. It's whatever's appropriate for the person and how they feel. Don't tell me how to dress because it's not appropriate for my age. If I like something and I enjoy wearing it, I should be allowed to do that without being judged. So I do hope I can add to the conversation a little bit about that by talking about this book.
Yeah, I think that is an important message. It is about how you feel. You're only as old as you feel. And it's about acceptance more than anything, because we grew up with the, getting older. We looked at our grandparents. I mean, my grandmother was, I'd say, old before her time. She was born in 1929, so she'd have been the greatest generation. And she got to her early 50s and retired, and that was it for her as far as she was concerned. She was then old, doddery, and retired, and lived her life that way. Whereas I see some people, they retire, but they found a new path. My friend who died last year, she was 78, but in the year before she passed away, she had gone on a walking tour of Amsterdam. She went to Australia on her own for 6 weeks. She was constantly traveling all over the country. She was part of the U3A. She did all these vibrant things, and you'd never have thought of her as being in her late 70s.
I think times are changing, in that probably in your grandmother's time, being in your 50s was generally regarded as being old, whereas I think we don't think that now. Certainly if you're in that age group, you don't feel that way.
No, she retired not much older than I am now.
Yeah.
And I certainly
didn't imagine that, really.
I certainly don't think of myself as old and doddery, and I mean, I'm ready to retire. But to be fair, I think most people are ready to retire the minute they start working. So it's one of those things, and I think it's quite sad that there is still that stigma about getting old, especially for women.
Well, that's the annoying thing, isn't it? It's always worse for women. And we're probably guilty of it, of judging each other on that as well. And we need to get rid of that, really. I mean, we're very good at supporting each other.
But we're also quite good at tearing each other down.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been brought up with this idea of, I read all the fashion magazines when I was younger, and all the teenage magazines, and it's all about being thin and looking like this and looking like that. And I find, I still try to overcome that in my mind, but it is quite ingrained. So it is difficult to fight it. I try every day to not care.
My hair's a little bit out of place. So look at my roots. Oh no, there's another grey hair.
I know, it creeps up on you. You think, oh, actually, yeah, I look fine, and then you think, oh no, no.
And then a hairdresser finds a grey hair at the back of your head and holds it up. That's what happened the first time I found a grey hair. I was 31, and the hairdresser, I was sitting in the hairdressing in the chair, and he holds this hair up and says, "Oh, you've got a grey hair here." I'm thinking,
thanks
okay,
for that.
I didn't need to know. I couldn't see it where it was. I was perfectly fine with not being aware of it.
Yes,
You
yes.
did not need to share that
we don't-
knowledge.
No. So I think we need to be kinder to ourselves, really.
Yeah. And I think that, as you said, there's that expectation regarding how we should look, how we should feel about how we look, what we should do about how we look, and fit into these little molds. But everybody is unique, and fitting in those molds is actually sometimes far more detrimental to our mental health and well-being than actually fitting in them.
Very true. Yes. I think the other stereotype is that women over 60 aren't interested in sex. And often if you talk to people, it's because of the relationship they're in and where they've got to in that, as opposed to not being interested in sex. And
We say that, wasn't there a study done a good few years ago now that stated that there were far more cases of STDs in nursing homes and old people's homes than there were in high schools.
really? God.
Yes.
I know that the number of STDs was going up, as was drinking. Maybe the two are related. But I suppose you think if you're not worried about getting pregnant, you might be a bit more reckless about things. One of the things that my publisher liked when I first signed with them was the fact that Sophia was having sex, because they said in a lot of books, women that age don't really have sex, or if they do, it's just very behind the door and not really referred to.
Closed door romances.
So it'll be interesting to see how people respond to that element.
I think it's also going to be
shocking.
interesting. It's also going to be interesting to see how they respond to the fact that she is the one seeking out no commitment and just having fun.
Yeah, I think I read a review where they thought that was terrible. How could I write a book like that, kind of thing? I think, well,
But if she was younger, would they have judged it?
Or more importantly, if she was a man, would they have judged it? I think, it's the judgment is usually on women, isn't it, on that? And if you're an older woman, it's even more the case.
Because you should know better.
Yes.
But we could probably talk for hours about age, expectations, and reputation. But it would be great if you could tell people where they can find out more about the book and where they can find you on social media.
Okay, on social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and it's N Lamakan on both of them. And I have a website, niloufarlamakan.com, where there's a little bit more about me. And the book is available in the UK everywhere. And it is actually coming out in paperback in Australia on the 4th of June.
Fantastic.
So I'm busy trying to promote it there and having 5 o'clock in the morning meetings because of the time difference.
I used to work in a business. I actually used to work in medical and technical publishing, and a lot of businesses, obviously, especially the technology side of it, were in China and Australia. And I would get into the office at 6 o'clock in the morning to make phone calls because I wasn't going to make them on my own phone.
Yes. Well, this one was interesting because I thought it was going to be a phone call, and then it ended up being a video call at 5:15 in the morning, which I was not expecting. I did not look my best, but hey ho. Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the book's coming out in German next spring, which is I'm really excited about.
Sehr good.
A little bit easier to do promotion there, so I'm gonna get into that in the autumn and start working on promoting it there.
Fantastic. When did it actually come out over here?
It came out in February in ebook and paperback, and end of March for audiobook. So the audiobook is available on all the places that you can get audiobooks on.
Wonderful. So I will.
It's brilliant. Leah Marks, who's read it, I love her. She did such a great job on it, and she's perfect for the role.
Well, I will definitely be posting links. So anybody who wants to find out more about Age to Perfection, check the links in the info box below, because you'll be able to find the book. It is a really interesting, there's so much fun in there. Sophia and her friends are amazing. Yes, there are some rather villainous characters in there, and there are some very interesting familial twists as well. And I think those are important, as well as obviously getting Sophia's backstory, which is tinged with tragedy, to be fair.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's really lovely.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking all about your characters, and obviously a conversation about age, which both of us can identify with.
Yes. No, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. And I'm hoping this will pique other people's interests, and to pick up the book and read it and enjoy it.
Oh, fingers crossed. That's the thing. I mean, it's such a great, fun book, and it is so rare to find a romantic comedy or romance novel in general where the characters are that little bit older than is considered the norm, because so often they are the side characters or the support characters or the mums.
Yes, yes. And I think I'd say the book is quite strong on the comedy side. I don't know if you agree. So
Yes, there are certain moments, as I said, with the hair in the chin, for example, was a good one, and also Cement Man. Some of her
everyone's
dates
got their favourite.
yes, some of her dates are hilarious. Dog Man, for example. Yes, but you will know what I mean when you read the book. So again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really good fun talking about Sophia and her friends.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this week. And again, thank you to Niloufar for joining me to talk about her novel Aged to Perfection, which is available to purchase now pretty much everywhere. And as always, thank you to everyone who's listening. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family? And please do post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you might listen. You can follow me on Instagram as Being Bookish Pod, on X as Being_Bookish, and on TikTok as Being Bookish Reviews. Of course, if you prefer to read everything, you can find some spoiler-free reviews and my 2025 reading tracker, plus links to the podcast wherever you might want to listen on my website, beingbookish.co.uk. Until next time, this is me saying farewell.